The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under the crystal chandelier, reflecting the faces of 12 board members who sat waiting. My father, Victor Hale, sat at the head of the table with a leather folder in front of him. His hands, weathered from years of building his empire, rested on the document that would decide everything. My brother, Cameron, sat to his right, leaning back in his chair with that smug expression I had grown to hate. He looked like a king waiting to inherit a kingdom he had never worked to build. I sat across from them, my hands folded on the table, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. This was supposed to be the moment when everything changed. When my years of sacrifice, my late nights, my bleeding knuckles from loading shipments in the warehouse, my relationships sacrificed for this company finally meant something. My father picked up his pen, and the room went silent. He signed the first page slowly, deliberately. Then the second. Then the third. When he reached the final page, he paused and looked up. But he didn't look at me. He looked at Cameron. And then, without a word, he slid the folder across the table to my brother. Not to me. Not to the daughter who had built this empire beside him. The air left my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared at that folder sitting in front of Cameron like it was a bomb that had just exploded in my chest. My father cleared his throat and spoke, his voice carrying that authoritative tone I had heard 1,000 times. Cameron will take over as CEO effective immediately. The board has approved this succession plan unanimously. He paused, and then said the words that would haunt me forever. It's time the future of this company rests on real family shoulders. Real family. The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like shrapnel. Real family. As if I wasn't his daughter. As if I hadn't spent 15 years working beside him, building Hale Industries from a struggling warehouse operation into a multi-million-dollar logistics empire. As if every late night, every cancelled date, every missed holiday meant nothing because I wasn't born with the right anatomy. Cameron grinned and stood up, raising his glass of champagne that had been waiting on the sidebar. To new beginnings, he announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. To the future of Hale Industries. The board members raised their glasses. My father raised his glass. Nobody looked at me. I sat frozen, my hands still folded on the table, my face carefully blank even though inside I was screaming. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. My name is Lydia Hale, and until that moment in the boardroom, I had believed that hard work mattered. That dedication meant something. That blood and sweat would eventually be rewarded. I was 34 years old, and I had spent 15 years of my life building my father's company. Not helping. Not supporting. Building. When I was 19, fresh out of high school while my friends went to college, I joined Hale Industries. It was just my father, 2 warehouse workers, and me back then. We ran a small freight logistics operation out of a crumbling warehouse on the industrial side of town. My father had big dreams but no money and no real plan. So I became the plan. I learned the business from the ground up. I managed shipments. I negotiated with suppliers who treated a teenage girl like a joke until I proved I knew more than they did. I worked the warehouse floor, loading boxes when we were short-staffed. I handled payroll, invoicing, customer complaints, everything. When my father's health scare nearly bankrupted us 10 years ago, I was the one who kept the company alive. I worked 20-hour days. I restructured our debts. I found new clients when the old ones were threatening to leave. I saved everything. And now, sitting in that boardroom, watching my brother toast his new position with champagne he didn't earn, I realized something terrible. My father had never intended to give me anything. I was never the heir. I was just free labor. Growing up, Cameron and I lived in completely different worlds even though we shared the same house. My brother was 3 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, he was treated like royalty. When Cameron got bad grades in school, it was okay because boys mature slower. When he wrecked his car at 16, my father bought him another one. When he got arrested for underage drinking, my father made it disappear with money and connections. Cameron was never held accountable for anything. He was protected, coddled, given chance after chance to prove himself. And he never did. Meanwhile, I was expected to be perfect. I got good grades because that's what daughters did. I worked in the warehouse after school because the family needed help. I didn't get to go to college because someone needs to stay and help your father. Every time I asked about my future, my father would pat my shoulder and say, "You're the reliable one, Lydia. I can count on you." I thought it was a compliment. I thought he meant I was valuable. What he really meant was that I was useful. And there's a difference between being valuable and being useful. Valuable things are treasured. Useful things are used. I was a tool in his hand. And when he found a better tool, or in this case, when Cameron finally reached an age where my father could pretend he was capable, I became disposable. The early years at Hale Industries were brutal. The warehouse was a converted factory building that leaked when it rained and had no heating in the winter. I wore 3 layers of clothing and gloves with the fingers cut off so I could still handle paperwork while my breath fogged in the frigid air. Our first major client was a manufacturing company that needed their products shipped to retailers across 3 states. It was more business than we had ever handled before, and we were desperate to prove ourselves. But our 2 warehouse workers quit the first week, overwhelmed by the workload. My father panicked. "We're going to lose this contract," he said, pacing back and forth in the tiny office. "We can't fulfill these orders." "Yes, we can," I said. I was 20 years old and stubborn as hell. For the next 3 months, I worked 18-hour days. I managed the shipping schedules, coordinated with trucking companies, and physically loaded boxes when we fell behind. My hands blistered and bled. My back ached so badly I could barely stand some mornings. But we fulfilled every order on time. That client was so impressed they signed a 5-year contract with us. That contract saved the company. It gave us the stability to hire more workers, to expand our services, to grow. My father threw a celebration dinner and told everyone who would listen about his brilliant business strategy. He never mentioned me. Not once. I learned then that my work would always be invisible as long as I stayed in his shadow. But I didn't know how to step out of it. Not yet. Family dinners at the Hale house were performances. My mother, Eleanor, would cook elaborate meals that nobody really tasted. My father would sit at the head of the table and hold court, talking about business, about his vision for the future, about his plans for the company. Cameron would sit there, half listening, occasionally making jokes that my father found hilarious even though they weren't funny. And I would sit quietly, eating my food, waiting for someone to ask me about my day, about the deals I had closed, about the problems I had solved. Nobody ever did. Instead, I would hear stories like this: "Cameron, tell your mother about that client meeting you sat in on last week," my father would say, beaming with pride. Cameron would shrug. It was fine. Mostly just listened while Lydia did all the talking. My father would nod enthusiastically. "But you were there. That's what matters. You're learning the business. Someday all of this will be yours to run." Those words stung every time. Someday all of this will be yours. Never yours and Lydia's. Never "we're building this together as a family." It was always Cameron's future. I was just the scaffolding that helped build it. But I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that if I just worked hard enough, proved myself enough, my father would eventually see me. He would eventually acknowledge what I had done. I was wrong about everything. The first real betrayal happened when I was 25. I had spent 6 months negotiating a contract with a major retail chain. It was the biggest deal Hale Industries had ever attempted, worth $3 million annually. I had researched their needs, created a customized proposal, and pitched it directly to their procurement team. After countless meetings and revisions, they finally agreed. I was ecstatic. I rushed back to the office to tell my father, expecting him to be thrilled. He was. But not for the reasons I thought. The next morning, there was a company-wide meeting. My father stood at the front of the conference room with Cameron beside him. I have exciting news, my father announced. Thanks to Cameron's hard work and strategic thinking, we've just secured our largest client to date. My stomach dropped. People applauded. Cameron grinned, accepting congratulations from coworkers who didn't know the truth. I stood at the back of the room, invisible and voiceless. After the meeting, I confronted my father in his office. That was my deal. I negotiated that contract for 6 months. My father looked at me like I was being dramatic. Lydia, this isn't about credit. This is about the company. Cameron needs to be seen as a leader. He's learning. You understand that, don't you? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I nodded and walked out. And as I passed Cameron in the hallway, he smirked at me. That smirk told me everything. He knew exactly what was happening. And he didn't care. While Cameron lived his life freely, traveling, drinking, dating whoever he wanted, I sacrificed everything for Hale Industries. I canceled vacations because shipments needed to be monitored. I missed my best friend's wedding because a major client had an emergency that only I could solve. I broke up with the only man I ever truly loved because he wanted me to choose between him and the company. You're never here, Lydia, Marcus had said, his voice tired and defeated. Even when you're physically here, your mind is at the office. I can't compete with that. I wanted to explain that I had to work this hard. That my future depended on proving myself. That if I just held on a little longer, everything would be worth it. But I couldn't find the words. So I let him go. Meanwhile, Cameron spent his weekends at expensive clubs, his summers traveling through Europe, his evenings at bars with friends. He showed up to the office late, left early, and spent most of his time in meetings where other people did the actual work while he nodded along. But my father saw none of this. Or if he did, he made excuses. Cameron is still young. He's figuring things out. He has time. I was young too. But nobody ever gave me time to figure things out. I was expected to be perfect from day one. And the cruelest part was that I kept believing it would matter. I kept believing my sacrifices would eventually be rewarded. That's how they keep you trapped. They make you believe that if you just work a little harder, endure a little longer, sacrifice a little more, you'll finally get what you deserve. It's a lie. There was one moment, just one, when I thought my father actually saw me. It was 3 years before the boardroom betrayal. We had just closed a deal with a national shipping company that would triple our revenue. It was late at night in the office, just the two of us reviewing the final contracts. My father leaned back in his chair and looked at me with something that almost looked like gratitude. Lydia, he said quietly, I couldn't do any of this without you. You know that, right? My heart swelled. Finally. Finally, he was acknowledging everything I had done. You've always been the one holding this company together, he continued. You're the backbone of everything we've built. I held on to those words like they were a lifeline. I repeated them to myself during the long nights, the frustrating days, the moments when I questioned whether any of this was worth it. My father sees me. He knows what I've done. He'll make it right. But words are easy. They cost nothing. And my father was very good at saying things he didn't mean. Because when the time came to actually prove those words with actions, when the moment arrived to show that he valued me as much as he claimed, he chose Cameron instead. He chose the son who had done nothing over the daughter who had done everything. And that's when I understood. My father hadn't been blind to my contributions. He had seen everything. He just didn't care. Because in his mind, I was doing what daughters did. Supporting. Helping. Making men's dreams possible. I wasn't supposed to have dreams of my own. The boardroom announcement continued, but I had stopped hearing the words. My father was explaining the transition plan, talking about Cameron's vision for the company, outlining the new organizational structure. None of it included me. When he finally finished his speech, he asked if there were any questions. I raised my hand. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. Where do I fit in this new structure? My father blinked, as if surprised I had spoken. As if he had forgotten I was in the room. You'll continue in your current role, of course. Director of Operations. Cameron will need your support during this transition. Support. That word again. Always support. Never lead. Never decide. Never own. I see, I said quietly. Cameron leaned forward, his expression mockingly sympathetic. Don't worry, sis. We'll make sure you're taken care of. Maybe we can create a nice office for you somewhere. Something comfortable. You've worked so hard for so long. You deserve to slow down a bit. The condescension in his voice made my skin crawl. He was already treating me like a retired employee, someone to be thanked for their service and then shuffled aside. The board members looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They had approved this succession plan. They had chosen Cameron over me. It didn't matter that I knew more about the company than anyone in this room. It didn't matter that Cameron couldn't tell you our profit margins or name our top 3 clients without looking at notes. He was the sun. And that was enough. Smile sharp and cruel. Hey, Lydia, he said, loud enough that a few lingering board members could hear. No hard feelings, right? Dad had to make a tough choice. But don't worry. I'll make sure you have a little desk job somewhere. Maybe assistant to the assistant or something. He laughed at his own joke. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way he expected. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and smiled. Thank you, Cameron. That's very generous of you. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. He looked momentarily confused by my reaction. He had wanted to see me hurt, to see me beg, to see me diminished. But I gave him nothing. I walked past him out of the boardroom, down the hallway, and into my office. I closed the door, locked it, and stood there in the silence. My stomach twisted into knots. My chest felt like it was caving in. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment I couldn't process it. But I didn't let myself break down. Not yet. Not where anyone could see. I had learned long ago that showing weakness in this building was dangerous. I waited until everyone had gone home before I finally let it happen. I sat alone in my office, the city lights glowing through the window, and I broke. Not with dramatic sobs or screaming. Just quiet, painful tears that I couldn't stop. 15 years. 15 years of my life. For nothing. I had given everything to this company, to my father, to the Hale family legacy. And they had erased me with a single signature. I cried for the 19-year-old girl who had skipped college to work in a freezing warehouse. I cried for the relationships I had sacrificed, the life I had put on hold, the dreams I had buried because I thought loyalty mattered. I cried because I had believed that hard work would be rewarded. That dedication would be recognized. That family meant something. But most of all, I cried because I had been so stupid. So blind. So willing to accept scraps while pretending they were feasts. When the tears finally stopped, I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen. My face looked hollow, exhausted. But something else was there too. Something I hadn't seen in years. Anger. Real, burning, focused anger. I washed my face with cold water and stared at my reflection. They erased you, I whispered to myself. They think you're gone. They think you'll just quietly accept this. I took a deep breath. Now you're going to erase their illusion of power. I didn't know exactly how yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done being invisible. I went home that night and pulled out my private bank statements, the ones I had been quietly maintaining for years. When you work 80-hour weeks with no life outside the office, you save money. A lot of money. I had been making a healthy salary at Hale Industries for over a decade, and I had barely spent any of it. No vacations. No expensive hobbies. No luxury purchases. Just a modest apartment and a reliable car. I had nearly $200,000 in savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to start something. Enough to plant a seed. I opened my laptop and started researching. I looked at logistics companies that were struggling, at market gaps that bigger companies ignored, at suppliers and clients who felt underserved by the major players in our industry. I made lists. I created spreadsheets. I built plans. I wasn't going to do anything flashy or dramatic. I wasn't going to storm into my father's office and announce I was starting a competing company. That would just give them ammunition to sabotage me. Instead, I was going to be smart. Patient. Strategic. I would build my own empire quietly, piece by piece, while they celebrated Cameron's coronation and assumed I had accepted my place. They had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated me. And by the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late to stop me. That night, I barely slept. But for the first time in years, it wasn't because I was stressed about Hale Industries. It was because I was excited about my own future. Over the next 6 months, I watched Cameron destroy everything I had built. My father stepped back from day-to-day operations, declaring he was confident in Cameron's leadership and wanted to enjoy some well-deserved rest. What that really meant was that he was washing his hands of responsibility while Cameron drove the company into the ground. Cameron's first decision was to buy himself a corner office renovation that cost $60,000. Italian marble floors, custom furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows. We need to project success, he announced to the leadership team. Meanwhile, he canceled the annual bonuses for warehouse workers because we need to watch our expenses. His second decision was to hire 3 of his college friends for made-up executive positions with 6-figure salaries. None of them had any experience in logistics. They spent most of their time having long lunches and planning weekend trips. Then Cameron decided to expand into overnight delivery services without doing any market research or feasibility analysis. He just liked the idea of being able to say Hale Industries offered overnight shipping. I tried to warn him. Cameron, we don't have the infrastructure for that. We need to invest in new vehicles, hire night shift workers, completely overhaul our routing systems. The startup costs alone would be, I don't need you to tell me how to run my company, he interrupted. This is the future, Lydia. Dad always said you think too small. His company. My father watched all of this with proud eyes, convinced his son was being bold and innovative. I stopped trying to warn them and just watched. And I took notes. While Cameron was busy playing CEO, I was quietly building something of my own. I started with the suppliers. Over 15 years, I had developed relationships with dozens of vendors, manufacturers, and service providers. Many of them had contacted me over the years with ideas or opportunities that Hale Industries had been too big or too busy to consider. Small contracts that weren't worth my father's attention but could be profitable with the right approach. I started reaching out to these contacts, not as Lydia from Hale Industries, but as Lydia Hale, independent consultant. I'm exploring some opportunities outside my current position, I would say carefully. I'm looking at underserved markets in regional logistics. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership? Many of them jumped at the chance. They remembered me. They trusted me. More importantly, they had all experienced being treated like their business didn't matter by bigger companies like Hale Industries. I treated them differently. I listened to their needs. I created customized solutions. I followed through on my promises. Slowly, quietly, I built a network. Not loud or flashy. Just solid, reliable relationships with people who valued competence over pedigree. One supplier told me, "I've been in this business 30 years. You're the first person at Hale Industries who ever treated me like a partner instead of a vendor. If you ever start your own company, I'll be your first client." I smiled and filed that away. The time was coming. 6 months after being passed over, I officially registered my own company, Summit Logistics LLC. I did it quietly, using a lawyer to handle the paperwork so my name wouldn't immediately appear in public records. I set up a small office in a business center across town, nothing fancy, just a desk and a computer. I hired one person initially, a former Hale Industries employee named Marcus who had been fired by Cameron for not fitting the company culture, which really meant he had questioned one of Cameron's terrible ideas. Marcus was brilliant, hardworking, and hungry for a chance to prove himself. Sound familiar? "Why did you call me?" Marcus asked during our first meeting. "Because you're good at what you do," I said simply. "And because you understand what it's like to be underestimated." He smiled. "When do we start?" We started immediately. I took on small contracts at first, the ones that big companies ignored because they weren't profitable enough. Regional deliveries for small manufacturers. Rush orders for local businesses. Time-sensitive shipments that required personal attention. We were lean, fast, and reliable. Our overhead was minimal, so we could offer competitive rates. Our service was exceptional because we actually cared about our clients' success. Word spread. Within 3 months, we had 10 regular clients. Within 6 months, we had 20. My savings were being invested back into the company, but we were profitable from month 1. Nothing massive, but steady growth. Sustainable growth. The kind of growth that lasts. And the best part? Neither my father nor Cameron had any idea what I was building. Family dinners became torture, but I kept attending them. I needed to maintain appearances, to seem like the dutiful daughter who had accepted her place. My mother would ask polite questions about work, and I would give vague answers. "It's fine. Busy." Cameron would dominate the conversation, bragging about his leadership decisions, talking about his vision for the company's future. My father would nod approvingly, occasionally glancing at me as if expecting me to add some supporting comment. One night, Cameron was particularly obnoxious. "You know what the problem with the old guard is?" he said, clearly referring to me even though he wouldn't say my name. "They're afraid to take risks. They're stuck in this mindset of slow growth and conservative decisions. But that's not how you build an empire." My father chuckled. "You always did have bigger dreams than your sister." The insult was casual, almost thoughtless. But it cut deep. Bigger dreams. As if my dreams had been small. As if I hadn't been the one who actually made his dreams possible. "That's interesting," I said, my voice calm. "How's that overnight delivery expansion going, Cameron? Are you meeting your projections?" His face flushed slightly. "We're in the development phase. These things take time." "Of course," I said, smiling sweetly. "I'm sure it will all work out." Under the table, my hands were clenched into fists. But on the surface, I was perfectly pleasant. Let them think I was harmless. Let them think I had given up. Because while they were patting themselves on the back, I was multiplying my fortune in the shadows. The turning point came exactly 1 year after I started Summit Logistics. I had been carefully watching Hale Industries' client list, waiting for the right opportunity. And then it came. Morrison Manufacturing, one of Hale Industries' oldest clients, had grown frustrated with the declining service quality. Their account rep had told me privately that they had been complaining to Cameron for months about missed deliveries, damaged shipments, and poor communication. Cameron's response had been to tell them they were being too demanding and that if they didn't like Hale Industries' service, they could find someone else. So they did. They found me. I pitched Morrison Manufacturing exactly what they needed: personalized service, flexible scheduling, transparent communication, and accountability. I offered them a rate that was competitive but fair, and I promised them something Hale Industries no longer could: reliability. They signed a contract worth $800,000 annually. It was the biggest deal Summit Logistics had landed, and it came directly from my family's company. When the news hit the logistics industry, people noticed. Trade publications ran small articles: Morrison Manufacturing switches to boutique logistics provider. Summit Logistics wins major manufacturing contract. My father's phone started ringing with questions from other board members. Who is Summit Logistics? How did they steal one of our oldest clients? And when someone finally connected the dots and realized Summit Logistics was owned by me, the real panic began. I was at my office when Marcus burst through the door, grinning from ear to ear. "Lydia, your father just called the office 3 times. He sounds furious." I didn't return my father's calls immediately. I let him stew for 2 days, let him wonder what was happening, let him realize that I wasn't under his control anymore. When I finally called him back, his voice was tight with barely controlled anger. "Lydia, we need to talk. Come to the house tonight." "I'm busy, Dad. I have a company to run." Silence on the other end. "Then, you stole Morrison Manufacturing from us." "I didn't steal anything," I said calmly. "They came to me because they were unhappy with Hale Industries' service. I gave them a better option. This is corporate sabotage. You're using insider knowledge to poach our clients. That's illegal." I laughed, actually laughed. "Dad, I left Hale Industries a year ago. I have no insider knowledge except what's publicly available. Morrison came to me because Cameron ignored their complaints and told them to find another provider. So they did. That's not sabotage. That's bad customer service catching up with you. You need to drop that account," he demanded. "Or what?" I asked. "You'll fire me?" "Already done." "You'll cut me out of the family business?" "Way ahead of you on that one." "Tell me, Dad, what exactly do you think you can do to me that you haven't already done?" He sputtered, searching for threats that no longer held power. "You're making a huge mistake, Lydia. This industry is small. People will hear about this. Your reputation, my reputation is that I deliver results," I interrupted. "Ask Morrison. Ask any of my clients. They'll tell you I'm the best decision they ever made." Cameron's catastrophic failure came faster than I expected. His overnight delivery expansion, the one he had insisted on despite every warning, collapsed spectacularly. He had overextended the company financially, purchasing new vehicles and hiring staff before securing enough client contracts to justify the expense. The vehicles sat idle, burning money in maintenance and insurance costs. The staff had nothing to do. The few overnight contracts Cameron had managed to secure weren't covering even a fraction of the operational costs. The company was hemorrhaging money, and Cameron's solution was to double down. He started offering deep discounts to attract overnight delivery clients, pricing the service below cost just to claim they had customers. It was business suicide. Within 6 months, Hale Industries had burned through $3 million on the failed expansion. The board started asking hard questions. Investors grew nervous. And my father, who had been so certain of his son's brilliant leadership, finally started to see the cracks. But it was too late. The damage was done. Meanwhile, Summit Logistics continued its steady, profitable growth. We had expanded to 40 regular clients. I had hired 5 more employees. We had moved to a larger office. And I had started reaching out to more of Hale Industries' dissatisfied clients. 3 more of them switched to Summit within 8 months. Each one made headlines in the logistics trade publications. Each one was another crack in Hale Industries' foundation. And each one was another step in proving that I hadn't needed my father's company. His company had needed me. The National Logistics Conference was held downtown at the Grand Ballroom, a yearly event where industry leaders gathered to network and showcase their companies. I had attended this conference every year for a decade as a representative of Hale Industries, always in the background while my father and later Cameron took center stage. This year was different. This year, I attended as the CEO of Summit Logistics, and people knew my name. I walked into the ballroom wearing a navy blue suit that cost more than I would have spent a year ago. I had learned that presentation mattered in this industry, that being taken seriously sometimes meant looking like you deserved to be. Within minutes of arriving, I was surrounded by people wanting to talk. Ms. Hale, I've been reading about your company. Very impressive growth. Lydia, we should discuss potential partnerships. I think our companies could work well together. I heard you won the Morrison account. That's quite a coup. I smiled and shook hands and made connections, feeling more powerful than I ever had at Hale Industries. Across the room, I spotted my father and Cameron. They stood together, drinks in hand, surrounded by a noticeably smaller crowd than usual. Several people who would normally gravitate toward them were instead talking to me. Our eyes met. My father's expression was unreadable, a mix of shock and something that might have been grudging respect. Cameron looked furious, his face red, his jaw clenched. I raised my glass slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to the investor I was speaking with. I didn't need to gloat. My presence was enough. The fall of Hale Industries was not sudden or dramatic. It was a slow, grinding collapse that anyone paying attention could see coming. Cameron's mismanagement combined with the loss of major clients created a perfect storm. The overnight delivery disaster had left the company deeply in debt. The defection of Morrison Manufacturing and 3 other major clients had gutted their revenue. And Cameron's continued poor decisions kept making things worse. He fired experienced employees to cut costs, which only decreased service quality further and drove away more clients. He took out loans to cover operational expenses, which increased their debt burden. He tried to blame everyone else, pointing fingers at the employees, the board, the economy, anything but his own incompetence. My father, who had once been so confident in his son's leadership, was now desperately trying to salvage what remained. But it was too late. The board had lost confidence. Investors were pulling out. Clients were leaving in droves. And then the opportunity one had been waiting for arrived. Hale Industries announced they were selling off assets to cover debts. Warehouses, vehicles, equipment, even some client contracts were being put up for sale. I reviewed the listing carefully, identifying the pieces that would be valuable to Summit Logistics. And then, with my lawyer's help, I started making offers. I bought their best warehouse at 40 cents on the dollar. I purchased a fleet of vehicles for a fraction of their worth. I acquired client contracts that I knew would be profitable under proper management. Piece by piece, I dismantled what was left of my father's empire and rebuilt it as my own. And I did it all legally, fairly, through proper business channels. I just did it better than they ever had. My father showed up at my office on a Tuesday morning without calling ahead. My assistant buzzed me nervously. "Ms. Hale, your father is here." He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting he needs to see you. I took a deep breath. Send him in. He walked into my office looking 10 years older than the last time I had seen him. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped. The confident, commanding presence that had defined him for so long was gone. He stood in the doorway like a man who wasn't sure if he was allowed to enter. "Hello, Dad," I said, not standing up from my desk. He closed the door behind him and sat down in the chair across from me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I need your help." 3 words. No preamble, no small talk, no apology. Just naked desperation. "With what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Hale Industries is going under. We're hemorrhaging money, clients are leaving, the board is talking about bankruptcy. I need you to come back. Help me fix this." I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. "Why would I do that?" "Because it's the family company. Because I'm your father. Because we built this together." His voice cracked slightly. I shook my head slowly. "No, Dad. We didn't build it together. I built it while you took the credit. There's a difference. Lydia, please. I'm asking you to help save everything we worked for." I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. Then I spoke, my voice cold and clear. "You told me the company needed to rest on real family shoulders. Remember that?" My father tried to argue, to negotiate, to guilt me into helping him. But I remained firm. "I can't help you, Dad. I have my own company to run now. One that actually values my contributions." He left my office defeated, and I felt no satisfaction in his pain. Just emptiness. Just the weight of knowing that the man I had once worshipped had never really seen me at all. Meanwhile, Cameron's downfall was complete and public. The business community watched as the golden boy who had inherited an empire managed to destroy it in less than 2 years. Articles appeared in trade publications analyzing what went wrong, using Hale Industries as a cautionary tale about nepotism and incompetent leadership. Cameron tried to reinvent himself, reaching out to contacts for consulting positions or board seats. But his reputation preceded him. Nobody wanted to hire the man who had driven a profitable company into bankruptcy. I heard through mutual connections that he had moved to another city, taking a middle management position at a small firm. His arrogance had been his undoing. He had believed that being Victor Hale's son made him special, that the family name was enough. But names don't build companies. Work does. Knowledge does. Respect does. Cameron had none of those things. He had a title and a legacy handed to him, and he had squandered both. As for my father, he sold what remained of Hale Industries to a larger logistics company for pennies on the dollar. He retired quietly, his once mighty empire reduced to a footnote in industry history. I never spoke to him again after that day in my office. There was nothing left to say. The man who had taught me that family meant loyalty had proven that his version of family only extended to one gender. 5 years after that terrible boardroom betrayal, I stood in my corner office overlooking the city skyline. Summit Logistics had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We had 300 employees across 5 regional offices. We had contracts with major corporations and small businesses alike. Our annual revenue had reached $45 million, and we were still growing. Industry publications that once barely noticed me now called for interviews. "How did you build Summit Logistics so quickly?" they would ask. "What's your secret to success?" The answer was simple, though most people didn't want to hear it. I succeeded because I valued the people around me. Because I gave credit where it was due. Because I built a company based on competence and respect rather than ego and nepotism. I succeeded because I understood what it felt like to be overlooked, and I made sure nobody in my company ever felt that way. My team was loyal because I earned their loyalty. My clients trusted me because I delivered on my promises. My success was built on the foundation of everything my father had failed to understand. That evening, as the sun set over the city, I thought about the girl I had been in that freezing warehouse 15 years ago. She had believed that hard work would be rewarded. That loyalty would be returned. That family meant something. She had been wrong about so many things. But she had also been right about one thing. She was capable of building something extraordinary. She just needed to stop building it for someone else and start building it for herself. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus, my first employee and now my VP of operations. Board meeting tomorrow. Investors are thrilled with Q4 projections. You should be proud. I smiled. I was proud. Not because I had proven my father wrong, though I had. Not because I had surpassed Hale Industries, though I had done that too. I was proud because I had built something meaningful. Something that treated people with dignity. Something that would outlast me because it was built on values rather than ego. The sweetest revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's thriving so loudly, so completely, so undeniably that they can never pretend you don't exist. My father had tried to erase me with a signature. Cameron had tried to diminish me with his smirk. But I had erased their illusion of power by building my own. I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. I wasn't the useful tool to be discarded. I was Lydia Hale, CEO of Summit Logistics, and I had created my own empire. Not beside my father. Beyond him. As I turned off the lights in my office and headed home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, complete, earned peace. They thought they could erase me. Instead, I had rewritten the entire story. And this time, I was the one holding the pen.